let's jump into it. Greg, thanks for joining us on the pair program. This is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. So this will be a fun discussion. Hear a little bit about your unique career journey, where you came from and how you arrived at this current point in your seat today as the co-founder and CEO of Ad Hoc. So we'll zigzag a little bit along the way, but some of the things that I'm excited to kind of draw on from this conversation, which is pretty front and center for us in our community, is a lot around how folks coming maybe from commercial technology backgrounds can innovate in the government space. Obviously pretty relevant to what you all are doing, but first off, I always like to start by getting into the foundation of who Greg Gershman is. So we usually kick off with the question, what did Greg Gershman have for breakfast this morning?
That is a great question. For breakfast this morning, I don't think I officially had breakfast. I was traveling this morning, but I think it was basically a kind bar. So yeah,
A little leftovers from the hiking in the Smokies.
yeah.
Solid. Well, breakfast is important, but that is not how we typically start off the conversation. We usually will say, give us a little bit, give the listeners a little bit of a context on Ad Hoc and the problems that you're solving here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, and thanks for having me on. So for those not familiar, Ad Hoc. So we're essentially like a digital services consultancy. We work with mostly federal, but also some state and local government agencies to help them build online services to help them serve the public. And we got started founded the company in 2014. The big challenge that my partner Paul Smith and I saw. So prior to founding the company, I had been doing some work with the White House. I was in this program called the Presidential Innovation Fellowship Program. And you may remember I was doing that in 2012 and early 2013. You may remember in October of 2013, there was this website called healthcare.gov that launched. And so, healthcare.gov was a very ambitious undertaking. And really, I think one of the first times in certainly, very visible times where the government really hung like the entire success of a piece of a social program on the functioning of a website. And, actually look in the law, there is mention of that there will be an online mechanism for signing up. So it's a big part of the strategy of the Affordable Care Act was that they would have this website and that anybody would be able to go to it and sign up and get healthcare. As you may remember, when it launched, it did not go very well. The website launched on October 1st. The number that I have seen, or kind of is the official numbers, that on the first day, 6 people were able to sign up for healthcare. And it's not that there were only 6 people who were interested. The website failed to, stay up with all the traffic that was coming at it, and made it very, very difficult for folks to create accounts, log in, fill out the 80 some questions that you needed to answer about yourself in order to determine your eligibility for healthcare, whether it would be subsidized or not, and then go through the process of selecting a plan. Only 6 people were able to get through that process. So I was very fortunate at the time. Had been working in and around the White House, gotten to know a lot of folks there, and was able to get involved with this effort to fix the website. From my perspective, as a software engineer, it's a website. I figured it was maybe some database tables needed to be optimized, something like that. But when we got on the ground and kind of put a team together of a couple people, all technology backgrounds, mostly software engineering backgrounds, what we saw was that the thing that had been built was really not the way we and all of us had experience, building high traffic websites, that were public facing, so like consumer internet kinds of things. not how we would have done it. The technology involved was very different than the technology we would have selected. The processes used were very different than how we would have organized or managed a project of that size and scope. And the experience of the people working on it was not necessarily, 100% aligned with building this kind of site that millions of people needed to access at once. It needed to help navigate people through a very complex process. Most people deal with healthcare through their employer. There's a limited set of options, not a whole lot to choose from. And so, you kind of just pick A, B, or C, something like that. This was, tons of plans, all sorts of new terms for people that no one really understood. So it's a very complex process. And, just that was a thing that government had not really tried to do on that scale at that point. And what we observed is that, the experience of the, in within the government ecosystem, by which I mean, the government itself, but also the vendors or contractors that government works with. Which, if if you've ever had experience with government, you'll know that contracting is a big part of how government gets stuff done. Right? There's kind of like a core of government employees, but then there's contractors who are employed, to bring in special kinds of skills to help government fulfill its mission. What we saw is like this, there was a big gap here in what the government had available to it, and what it was trying to achieve with a website like this. We kind of looked at that from the perspective of what are people used to? What do people experience in their everyday lives? In fact, if you go back and look at some of the press around the Affordable Care Act, the president at the time, Barack Obama, talked a lot about how he wanted there to sort of be like a kayak of healthcare, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
a site that pretty much all of us were familiar with. I think kayak is still relevant, right? It's sort of like a meta search for travel, but associated with like good user experience, good design, really streamlined functionality. You can get what you want to get done really quickly. That was a big thing, and that's what people expect from the services that they use online. Um, and so we saw that there was a lot missing there, and so we decided to start a company to try and bring that, in terms of experience, technology, process, into government, and see if there was a market for it. And so that's how we got started. That's really the sort of our origin story, so to speak, is that's the problem that we observed. And our solution was, let's start a company and bring people who have the same kinds of experience that we had into the government space and see if there's a need for that.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like a right place, right time kind of situation. You were right there when this situation arose, and you had kind of that background. And I was curious, did you have a co-founder that you started Ad Hoc with, or was it a solo founding at that time?
Yeah, so a gentleman by the name of Paul Smith, no relation to the fashion company or any of the other. That's a very common name. Yeah, Paul and I met the first day of the what we call the healthcare.gov rescue effort. We met right outside the White House. Ironically, we both had lived in Baltimore, just a couple miles apart from each other, for many years, but had never met. And Yeah, Paul and I got to know each other over the course of the couple months that we were working on, fixing healthcare.gov, and then teamed up to create an organization, create a company, to take it to the next level.
So I like to, backtrack a little bit here as well. Your kind of journey into the world of tech. Let's start there as well. How did you, I guess, get into technology? Was it something that, kind of ran in the family, or tell me a little bit about that journey into the world of tech?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, in right outside DC in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I was very fortunate that my parents got me a computer at a very young age. My first computer was a Commodore 128, and I just was always tinkering around, playing with it, playing games, experimenting with different things. Wrote a couple text-based games as a kid, always kind of playing around with stuff. And I think, at some point, in high school, I think I really felt like this is a path I want to go down. I also have a very creative side to me, so I like to sort of like create new things, build things, and I found that software was a good medium for me to be able to kind of express that. So it's been something that I've always really had an interest in. When it came to college, I did sign up to be a computer science major. I will admit, at the time, I didn't realize that it was essentially math, which was my least favorite subject. And so, but I managed my way through a computer science degree, and then coming out of that, started working as a software engineer from the beginning, right out of college, basically.
Yeah, I saw that. Was it Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab? Is that where you started?
Yeah, that was my first job out of college. The Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. Um, Great place. They do a lot of applied research. I got to
Mhm.
work on some simulation systems for missiles, and kind of measuring like how the radar works. Built like a little weather system that goes on the back of Navy cruisers. Stuff like that, which was was pretty cool for a young person to get the opportunity to work on things like that.
Yeah, they're doing some really interesting stuff. We actually have a couple of guests coming out of JHU APL that are talking more on this topic around innovating in defense, and of course like all the work that they do with defense research. It's really fascinating, and it seems like it's a great place to start a career in terms of getting you some exposure to tinkering. Getting you a little bit more of that flexibility. But that was that a cleared environment? Was it tell me about your introduction into going into, I guess you would call that more of like the public sector type of support.
Yeah, APL is not what I would typically call like public. I mean, it is public. It's it's applied research. Although they do take your stuff and then throw it on a boat or something like that and tell you that now it's in production. And we were not building it for that kind of thing. But um, uh, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a very cool place to work. It was cleared, so I had a secret clearance, which is not too hard to get, from what I could tell. Basically, if you haven't murdered anybody
Right.
recently, you can get a secret clearance. But Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, it was the timing for me was interesting. I started working there in 1999, which was like right at the beginning of like the web,
Hmm.
kind of boom. Right, it's when pets.com and all this stuff was happening, and very quickly I was there for just about a year, and I was really drawn towards the commercial sector. Really wanted to see if I could get get a job at a company, and work on some very cool public facing kinds of things, which that was very new back then.
Hmm.
So I ended up switching over. I worked at a company called Aether Systems, which was up in right outside Baltimore, and was a great environment. They'd gone public before I joined. They had a lot of money. I got to work in mobile application development before. This is well before the iPhone, so we were building a lot of that stuff from scratch. There were no uh, you know, uh, transmission protocols for mobile devices and things like that. So we had to do a lot of really cool, like lower level stuff, but also got to work at like the application level. And I got to do some R&D stuff there, which I thought was really cool. It was a great environment for me as a young technologist working in a tech company. I was challenged. I had people that that were mentoring me, that were helping me, guiding me, and really and lifting me up. And I loved working there, even though the company really didn't make any money, or wasn't profitable, and was that was the only downside to it. But I loved working there. I got to do some really cool stuff and worked with some really smart people. Eventually, got laid off from them in about 2003. So this is after 9/11, and the tech stuff started to kind of crash. And I at the time was recently married and had kids at like, two young kids at home,
Mm.
um, and needed a job. So I took the first job I could find, which was working for a large government contractor at a large government agency. I will, protect the innocent, or not by not referencing them by name. But you can find out more about them if you read various things. But uh, I was excited. Honestly, was really excited. That was really my first experience, what I would call public sector work.
Mhm.
Again, like the stuff at APL was very different. Kind of working in this academic almost environment. This was really the first time where I was doing, um, more of like a services role, on site with a customer, building something for them. And I was really excited about the mission of the agency that I was working for. I was helping a lot of people, and I thought that was really cool. But unfortunately, I just didn't feel the same kind of culture around technology in that environment. It was very, very different than what I had experienced working at a tech company. I really know principles around how they built software, how the company was organized, what processes they used, what technology they picked. No mentoring, no anything like that. I mean, as far as I could tell, honestly, like my main job was to show up so that I could put the number of hours that I worked on my timesheet, and then bill that to the customer. The rest of what was going on to me really just seemed like it wasn't the real important part of it. And I honestly was really turned off by that. I left there after 10 months. And frankly, just said to myself, like, if this is what government is like, I'm really attracted to the mission, and being able to work on things that have this kind of an impact. But I can't sacrifice at this stage in my career, going into an environment like that, and all the detriments that it would have to me in terms of my growth and my learning, and just my satisfaction with what I was going to be. I knew kind of intuitively I would not grow into the technologist I wanted to be, in that kind of an environment. So I left, worked in the commercial space for almost a decade. Did a couple startups, helped other people with startups. I did a lot of consulting, and then eventually found my way back into government around 2010. Was actually trying to start a company, and someone I pitched to invest and join the company, said, "That's a bad idea. You shouldn't do that.
Hmm.
Instead, you should come work with me on this thing we're building at the General Services Administration, called Search.gov." And you have I had built one of my first startup had been a search engine company. I built a search engine for blogs. So I learned a lot about how to build search engines. So he really wanted me to come work with him on that, and I did, and I was blown away. I thought all government programs were going to be like this, this experience I'd had when I was younger, and this was completely different. It was very small, very agile, very much like working in a startup.
Hmm.
Using Ruby on Rails, Elasticsearch, um, uh, you know, pushing to production multiple times a day, agile development. I was really excited. I was learning a ton. I was, even at that point, 10, 12 years into my career, learning new things, really excited about the work I was doing. And I had that impact that I had always, kind of liked about government. And so that's when I really started to think like, okay, I really want to, understand more about how we can make more of government like this, because
Mhm.
I saw the power of that model, and the fact that, you know, technologists like myself could be attracted to something like that, and saw that like there's something there. So that's really kind of when I think really got intrigued by the public sector, and kind of all the pieces kind of came together for me from my past experience to say like, here's how we can make this work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey because one, you're seeing, how technology is built in different ecosystems or different environments, right? Folks that are from the DC area, they'll be privy to, some of these large government contractors that are out there. I worked for one for 2 years after starting my first business, out in Indonesia. Came back and just felt like I was so confined to, not really being able to innovate. I felt like it was, and it's not like this is how all of them are, but for the most part, we made a conscious decision to pivot into commercial startups, instead of solely kind of supporting in the government contracting space, which is it's really in your face if you're in this area. It's tough to kind of navigate through the noise of like who's doing government contracting and who's maybe building a product or doing commercial consulting. So it's a very different environment, and if you've never worked in it before, it's tough to kind of wrap your head around like what we're describing here. So I was hoping to be able to use this conversation as a platform to paint that picture that there is opportunity in those supporting the government, but you're doing it in a different fashion here. It's almost like you took what you loved about being nimble, agile, working in commercial startup environments, and trying to inject some of this into how parts of the public sector build. And I think those are the things that So one of the questions I had teed up to ask you is, with Ad Hoc specifically, right? When you're hiring up, software engineers, what is it that you're kind of looking for to in a technologist, if you will, that you feel will be able to kind of apply and work with a government customer, right? Because you've kind of seen both sides of it, right? So when you're hiring, for example, are you looking for folks that have seen both sides, or are you looking for a mold of an individual that you just feel like they'll be able to adapt?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say that I tend to look more at, look for more like kind of inherent characteristics than necessarily like experience. I mean, you can have worked in government and it could have been a, one kind of experience. Like you said, I mean, it varies a lot, agency to agency, even, within an agency, program to program,
Mm-hmm.
project to project is very different. But, we look for people who, number one, are really passionate about what they do, right? Care a lot about technology. That's something that, for me, was always a big deal. Like, as a software engineer, I was very opinionated, and I still, if I talk to any of our teams working on things, one of the questions I'll ask them is like, what's your code coverage? What's your code test coverage? Like looking for people who, they don't necessarily have to agree with what my opinions are about software development or design or UX or product management or something like that. But we do look for people who are passionate about that kind of stuff, right? And really think deeply about it and care about it. We like to use the phrase "strong opinions loosely held," right? You should have an opinion on something, but you should also be open to being convinced otherwise through some kind of discourse or something like that. So that's number one. That's something we look for. Number two, we do look for people who want to see the impact of what it is that they're working on, because that's a big thing. Government can be for it's a lot of good work, but I think it's important to understand that like it's public money. If you understand, or at least the democratic process, we elect people who make laws, who determine like the things that we're going to spend our money on collectively as a country, as a community, as a society. And so there's a level of trust that's given to that, and so we do like to look for people who are interested in that, right? Like they take that responsibility that they're being given very seriously, and they're eager to take that skill that they have, that thing that they're passionate about, and apply it in a way where they can see that impact very clearly. So that's another thing that we're looking for. Those are probably the two primary things. Obviously we are looking at skill. So one of the things we started early on was a homework based process for technical talent. So actually before we even interviewed you in person, we would have you complete a homework, do a little programming challenge, send that in, we'd review it. We built a system where it was reviewed anonymously, so we wouldn't see anything about you. We wouldn't see your resume, we wouldn't see your name, we wouldn't see how many years of experience you had. We had people coming through there with 10, 12 years of experience who would do a terrible job. And then we'd have people coming in there through with like, who just got out of a coding boot camp, who would ace it, would do an amazing job. And so like we were very open about that, but just looking at, how do you solve problems? How do you think through a challenge? Can you explain that to us? Is a big thing that we would look for. And to some extent, we also assess like, uh, we have a really strong culture around collaboration. We refer to the company as a team. So there's a big element of support. We're looking for people who that we would want to work with. We really believe that the work environment needs to be one where people are free to be themselves, express themselves, do their best work when they can feel that they can be open and honest and things like that. Those kinds of things are very important. So we are evaluating a little bit along those lines as well. And then finally, the last thing, there does have to be a little bit of resilience. I love government. I've devoted the bulk of my career to it. Maybe not the bulk at this point, but a significant part of my career
Mm-hmm.
to government at this point. But it can be challenging, right? And it's the kind of thing that there are going to be days that are not going to be fun. You're here to write software, and you're going to be doing something completely different. But that's what has to be done in order to get the thing that you're working on over the finish line or to the next stage. And so the thing I always talk to people about is like, if you in your head can think about what's the impact that I'm making and what's the benefit, the positive benefit of that, hopefully for you that outweighs the negative of any of the bureaucracy or things like
Mm-hmm.
that you have to go through. You can't use this tool that you're very comfortable with, or you can't do a certain thing because policy says, or something like that, or that's not how we're going to do it. Those things, you have to. Everybody has to know like what that balance is for themselves. So we do try and figure out like is this person going to be able to uh, you know to be resilient in that kind of an environment, and that kind of thing. So that's just kind of a rough thing of what we look for. But yeah, in the early days, almost all the people that we hired did not have government experience,
Mm-hmm.
which was really, I think, in a lot of situations, what we were looking for, and also just a fact that like a lot of the way things were done in the private sector, in the commercial world, commercial tech, consumer tech, was just very different than how government was doing it. The
Mm-hmm.
technologies and the processes, and just not a lot of overlap.
Do you find like there's ever kickback, or back in the day was there kickback of trying to bring commercial into these environments? Or did they think that maybe it would adapt well, or what was what was like the biggest challenges of really building the trust with this type of a customer?
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate when we started the company. We had sort of like trust, kind of built in. We started working with both the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Department of Veteran Affairs, mostly because we had really trusted relationships, people that were bought into how we were going to do it. Right? We were, we are big proponents of agile development. We are big proponents of cloud infrastructure. And now it's very common to find what I will call real cloud. In circa 2014, there were a lot of different options for cloud floating around. Many of which they weren't really cloud. They were just essentially just like a virtual instances. And so like there were things that we valued pretty significantly. And we started out in with customers that either they embraced that as well, or they were very interested in learning learning more and experimenting with it with us. We were the first ones to use Amazon Web Services, at both of the agencies where we started, VA and CMS. First ones to do agile development, human centered design, product management later. That part I would say was relatively easy. As we've expanded into other parts of government, especially into places where that's not necessarily the case, where we didn't have that kind of pre-established trust and relationship when we started the company, it's a lot harder, right? Like it really
Yeah.
is. A lot of what it comes down to is how do people think about technology, and in the government, the person who's buying that, if they're contracting it, there's the line I say is there's no objective truth in government contracting, right? It's not like they put out a thing saying we need a new website that people can sign up for this new benefit, and they're going to evaluate that, and they're going to be able to tell oh, this proposal is objectively better than this proposal because they chose to use this, and like without any preconceived notions whatsoever, right? The
Mm.
person who or the people who are evaluating those proposals, they have a certain idea about what it is that they want to buy. They have a picture of technology, what works and what doesn't work and what they want. And the the person or the company that bids closest to that and is most aligned with that is the one that's going to win that contract and build that system. So that's a big challenge. I mean, even we've been doing ad hoc now for 9 years, and we still find the bulk of the market that's out there, especially now that we're a large business and having to compete more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way that 100% aligned with how we think about technology, and
Mm-hmm.
that is challenging. It's maybe one of the toughest challenges that we have right now as a business at the stage that we're at.
Yeah, there's a slogan and that's been thrown around in a book that was written called "Hack the Bureaucracy." What does that mean? What does that mean to you? And how would you explain that in terms of like how Ad Hoc is trying to innovate?
Yeah, so that book, written by Marina Nitze, who is a good friend of mine. We worked together at the White House, and she actually was the chief technology officer at the VA when we started the company. And so she was actually one of our first customers as well. I think what Marina's talking about in that regard, and I had a little bit of experience with this when I was a presidential innovation fellow. When you're inside government, it's it's very hard to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a lot of experience in big corporate environments, so I'm a little bit hypothesizing about what that's like. But you're in a big organization. There's ways to navigate it. Um, Government's very different than any of that. And so I think what Marina and Nick do in that book is kind of share their experiences for, when you're faced with, an organization that, large, unwieldy, does lots of different things, maybe has a certain element of dysfunction to it, from an operational standpoint, um, mostly made up of very well intentioned, very dedicated, people who want to be there and to make a difference. They have different advice, various, kinds of advice on how do you navigate that? What are some
Mm-hmm.
tools that you have in your toolbox to, build relationships, get stuff done, kind of build rapport, all those kinds of things. So yeah, and I had that book was really fun for me to read because we were I kind of know my strengths and weaknesses. And I like building stuff. And Marina and I were really good partners when we were working in the White House because Marina liked hacking the bureaucracy, and I liked building stuff.
Mm.
And I got a sense after being in government for a little while that there was going to be more building stuff going on the contractor side. Plus, I had my experience with healthcare.gov where I saw that there was a big gap in where the contractors were. And so that's kind of where I gravitated. I felt like that's where my skill sets were best, best kind of suited. But absolutely, I mean, there's a huge need for people inside government who have a vision for something. Whether that's an increase, a different kind of experience for people, a different kind of organization, increased capability or capacity in terms of talent or people. That kind of stuff is super, super important, and is a big part of what I would say is really the last 10 years, 11 years of you know this effort to kind of bring more modern technology into government. So it's a
Yeah.
great book. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's on my reading list. It's super relevant to a lot of the content that we're putting out right now on our community. And we don't have to get into this right now, but you can look at this too around, it gets really different from like federal, agencies to Department of Defense, might be a very different way of how, if you look at them as like customers almost, right? It's like, how am I going to be able to, to get my point across? Like, will I be able to get a common ground with this type of personality versus somebody in this other agency? So it's just it's a huge space, so trying to get real granular in it and break it down from different, almost like sub agencies within the government is what we're trying to do, and see if we can see some trends or just help educate, because one of the reasons that we decided to make a bit of a push for this type of media, some of these upcoming episodes on the podcast was, we primarily, work with commercial technologists that are coming from startup environments. It's no secret that the commercial startup space has gone through a tough period right now with the state of the economy, and so with that, a lot of these folks are turning to industries that are maybe a little bit more stable, and there's a there's a level of stability here if you think about supporting the government. And so trying to help them, navigate those waters and how they would, twofold. One, pursue an opportunity as a technologist, or two, building something, their own startup, and how they want to partner or sell to the government. These are things where you really have to kind of put yourself in the shoes of these folks and try to understand how to best position yourself to win an opportunity or to land a job. And so I think this is all helpful stuff. I think it was something I was researching from an article that you had written or a conference that you had spoken to about product management really isn't a term that gets used too much in the government space. A lot of project management's always historically been a pretty common term. Why is it, do you think, like product management should be maybe a term that's more so adapted to in the public sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is one of our, I'd say, like, kind of core founding tenets, is to think about things in terms of products and not projects. I think that goes back to how we've built things in the past. And things in the past, the old adage of like measure twice and cut once, right? You want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure you've got everything right before you do something that can't be undone. And that's very true if you look back historically. Like, if you build a building, it takes a long time, it's very expensive, and it's very hard to change once you've done it. If you've ever done home renovations, especially while you're living in the home, it's a very miserable experience, right? And even more so for like a big building, or things like aircraft carriers or airplanes or something like that. You want to get it as right as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Is you want to invest that time up front in making sure it's designed properly, anticipate all the challenges, and then build it and use it for as long as you possibly can. That's how we've done things for a long time. The thing about software, which I think we discovered sometime probably in like the late '90s, early 2000s, but really didn't kick in in most places till a little bit later, is that you actually had a lot of flexibility, and some of it has to do with how we built software and some of the tools that are available. But especially once the web, kind of came about, and things just started moving really, really fast. And so like development practices and everything had to keep up with the ability to change so frequently. Respond to new information or new like kinds of inputs, and also getting instant feedback from people using your things. We had to find ways to build things that kind of incorporated that in. And what we found is with software, you actually can change things around pretty significantly, for relatively low cost. Certainly not the same as like remodeling a house, or deciding that after I built this big office building, I need to move the bathrooms to the other side of the whatever, right? Software, you can do that stuff for relatively less expense. And so and then once you start to build in the fact that you have something that's out there, it gets used, you observe people using it, then you learn from that, and you want to put another iteration out, right? So all the advancements in technology and software led to a much different way of thinking about how do we put something out, how do we build and how do we manage something that's out there. And that is how the product management, product development kind of philosophy became very common in the startup world. So things like lean product, or
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things became very popular. But it's, I think, the recognition that when you have something, a piece of technology, it's not a static thing. As much as we would like to think it is, right? You build the building, you live in it for 50 years or whatever it is, and then you sell it to the next person, or whatever, it ceases to be useful and you knock it down. Um, uh, Technology is different, right? And it affords us the ability to iterate on something, improve it incrementally, adapt to new information. And that's the kind of thing that we like to kind of center our methodology around. And so and that's really critical, right? You put out a piece of technology, and it's current as of the day that it's launched. People use it, they're giving you
Mm-hmm.
feedback, you have to adapt it and change it. And even if they're not giving you feedback, people's expectations change over time,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to keep up with that or you will be left behind. A great example that I like to use about that is when I first started working in government in 2010, 2011, 2012. um, you know Mobile apps were just kind of getting started, kind of getting traction. But most of the time you went to a website if you had to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And our sort of like policy in the government was, we felt like it's best to tell people, don't build mobile apps. It's very expensive. It's a whole separate kind of development thing. Just build websites that are mobile responsive. So something it'll work just as well in a mobile browser as it will on a desktop browser. And I think that was the right call in, like, circa 2013, 2012, something like that. You look at it now, and there is no major service provider that any of us use on a day-to-day basis, or even like on a monthly basis, that doesn't have an app on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because apps have the phone has become the main way that we all access, stuff online. Um, Everybody's built their apps, whether it's you're taking a picture of your checks to deposit them in your bank,
Mm-hmm.
you're booking a hotel room, you're booking a flight. We all do this on our phones now, and we all use the apps. That's how we think about it. And so for a government agency to provide a service and not offer it through an app starts to feel like they're not meeting the needs. They're not keeping up to date with what people's expectations
Mm-hmm.
are. And so, whereas 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said you absolutely have to have a mobile app strategy. Now, when I talk to people, it's one of the first things that I'll tell them. It's like, this is what people expect. This is what they are expecting. And one of the projects we've done for the Department of Veteran Affairs has been very successful. Has been building a mobile app where we took a look at what do veterans need on the phone. When they actually pick up the phone and they have that persistent, app sitting on their phone. What are the things that would be most valuable to them, and building specifically to that. And that's been a really big success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think is really a testament to this idea of product management, right? Is that, like, you have to continually be evaluating how you're serving people, your product that's out there, and is it meeting their needs? And is there something else that you could be providing, that would meet their needs better than what you have out there? Which is really a question that, especially in government, is not something that they traditionally have asked very well, right? Put a law in place, you implement it, and that's it, right? They haven't
Mm-hmm.
thought about the technology as, something that evolves, something that needs to change on a frequent basis. And I think that's the product mentality really helps you do that.
Yeah, the user experience, right? The user research of, what is it that these folks really truly want, and really polling the users, human centered design, like really understanding how is it going to make their lives easier, or simplify things. I love your example about how apps have just, yeah, I mean, if you're not building an app, then, it's tough to have everybody just go to the website and figure it out from there. Like, give me that simplicity of just open up the app and everything's front and center. So true. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left for this segment, so I guess I'll just kind of wrap with what are some of those things that, looking at 2023 at Ad Hoc, what are some of these things that we can expect from an innovation perspective? Some of the technologies, some of those skill sets that you're foreseeing going to be in high demand this year.
Well, I think in the government space, I think there's still a tremendous amount of progress to be made. Just in terms of, again, like centering everything that we build around. Always good to have an intuition and kind of trust your gut, but also to provide some research and do that human centered design.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're seeing an increased adoption of those kinds of practices in government. This administration came out with the customer experience executive order, which has really helped government kind of center their attention around what are the things that we're building. What are the experiences that we're trying to provide, and not focus it as much around the agencies or the specific programs. And I think that's been really helpful in just kind of shifting everyone's mindset, to to that kind of a thing. So to me, that's something that I just see growing more and more every year. More agencies adopting that, moving into those kinds of practices. And this administration, I think, has been really key in kind of pushing that. So that's been good. The other thing that I would just say, I mean, it sounds kind of hype-ish and whatever, but I will say, I mean, if you go back and look at stuff I post online, I was very not a big believer in Web3 and crypto. And I'd like to say I think I was proven, myself and many others who said it was not really going to amount to much, proven correct. But I do think that AI and the stuff that's going on now with
Mm-hmm.
large language models is really something that's going to change the game quite substantially. We're thinking a lot about that and how it's going to impact everything from like the services that we offer our customers. We actually have done some very experimental kinds of things with it already with some customers that have been, I think, a success. But also, um, you know, uh, how it's going to change the experience for the developer, or for the researcher or for the product manager. How that's going to change what it is that they do, the skills that they have, the tools that they have available, and what that's all going to look like. I mean, it's moving so fast, faster than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In my, how many years have I been doing this? A while, 20 some years. I think that's really going to have a huge impact. That is one that I think everybody needs to be paying attention to that. It's really going to, I think, really change things quite substantially.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. We were just kind of polling our team earlier about AI. Is it something that you think you're very excited about how it's going to change the future? Does it make you terrified? There's a lot out there that folks are just a little concerned about, but at the same time, like it's one of those things where if you're not paying attention to it and you're not adapting to it, you will get left behind. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how it impacts these different industries, but certainly in the public sector, how is it going to be integrated? All right, so we're gonna flip here to another segment called the 5 second scramble. So this is going to be just kind of quick hit rapid fire Q&A. You'll have 5 seconds to sum up your answers. If it goes over 5 seconds, we're not going to air horn you or anything like that. So feel free to answer as you will. But let's jump into it, Greg. So let's just begin with what is your favorite aspect about working at Ad Hoc?
Uh, for me personally, I am just really proud of the team that we have here. It's a group of people who care and put their best foot forward every day and show up for their teammates, for our customers, and for the public that kind of by proxy we serve. So the people that work here are just awesome, and that's I think probably my favorite part of the whole thing.
Cool. I like how you use teammates. I do the same thing. We don't really call people like employees. It's more of like teammates. Um, what aspect of your culture do you most fear losing with growth?
Um, that's a good question. Uh, for me, there's lots of different answers to that question. I will say one of the things that's challenging for me. Before this company, I was a startup person and I worked in very small teams, and I still very much believe in the power of small teams. And we've grown to be, from my perspective, what is a very sizable organization.
What's
We're
that head count, by the way?
we're probably around 575 people right now.
Huh.
So yeah, I mean that's been a hard part for me is like how do we have that kind of common shared sense of
Mhm.
mission and purpose, as we get to be a bigger and bigger company, bigger organization. And so I'm always looking for ways that we can kind of instill that and bring people together, and find ways to strengthen the bonds of us as kind of a community of people who are working kind of maybe not on the same project but sort of a shared goal, common goal.
What about your work keeps you up at night?
uh, Pretty much everything. I worry a lot about about pretty much everything. We're a services business, right? So
Mhm.
it's a constant grind. You always have to be on to the next thing. I just that's something that always keeps me up, is right, is like want to make sure that we're always growing. If we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. And so, yeah, that's something I think I'll spend a lot of time thinking about.
What trait do you value most in your co-founder?
Um, Paul is probably one of the smartest people I know. He's a really, I think, deep thinker about things. He's very thoughtful, and he's just a really good partner. Him and I, we talk all the time, and he's someone that I can always turn to just talk to about what it is that we're doing, and we're very aligned on. Um, goals, values, and things like that. And so he's just a really good partner.
It's a fascinating relationship, right? I mean, they say it's like a marriage. You build a pretty strong rapport with this person, and a lot of startups fail because co-founders can't get along. So it's always interesting to hear what traits you all kind of play off one another. What kind of technologist thrives at Ad Hoc?
Like I said earlier, I think it's people who, both really care about their craft and also want to see something make an impact. I think that's very important, but also someone who has that sort of resiliency to understand that these are big environments. These are big ships, and we're trying to move them a little bit. So change takes a while. So you do have to have that the patience
Mhm.
to see that stuff take root and take hold.
What kind of roles does Ad Hoc hire for?
Roles. The majority of the people that work at Ad Hoc are software engineers. That's definitely our biggest demographic. We generally kind of put it into four buckets, which would be product management, UX, research, UX design, and then engineering. But we also have burgeoning practices around data science and data analytics, cybersecurity, content. There's probably more that I'm forgetting, for which I apologize. But we're focused on digital services, right? So how do
Mhm.
we build those things? And so really any disciplines that fit in there, are areas that we're interested in, finding folks.
Nice. What is a charity or a corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Yeah. One thing which we as an organization have gotten behind is there is an effort to make a national park or a national recreation area around centered around the Chesapeake Bay.
Hmm.
It's this amazing natural resource, and but doesn't have any official designation. And so there's a group called the Chesapeake Conservancy, which is working on advocating for a national recreation area, a part of the national park system to be formed around the Chesapeake Bay. And it's really cool the way they're doing it. I mean, there's such a diversity of history that centers around the bay and this area. Going back to like native communities, but as well as like enslaved populations. And so they're really conscious about making sure that not just the natural resources are protected and celebrated and used, but these stories are told in their full breadth, so that we get a full and accurate picture of the Bay Area and the history of the people that have how they've lived there and how they've made their lives around it. So we've been supporting that effort. It's been really cool to see that have released they have helped advocate for a draft legislation to actually put this into place. Was released I think last year, and it's making its way through the system. But that's really exciting. That's one thing that, as an organization, um, it's something I'm really excited about. It helps me kind of, I get to see a little bit of the inside of how that legislative advocacy process works.
Mhm.
And I'm a big outdoors person. I love being outside, and so national parks is something my dream agency to work with. Have not had the opportunity yet, but that would be an amazing. So this is something we're doing in the meantime to help with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll plug that in the show notes. Build a little bit more awareness for it. That sounds really neat. Well, you kind of queued me up for a follow up question here. Do you have a favorite national park?
That's a really tough one. I would
Yeah.
have to say it's pretty much a tie for me right now between Yosemite, which is just incredibly beautiful. The mountains and the valleys, and if you've ever been there when the waterfalls are going at full speed, it's amazing.
Mm.
Last year, I actually had an opportunity to go to Grand Teton National Park, which really kind of blew me away. I want to spend more time there. I was there for about 4 days, but really, really amazing place. So those would be my top two right now.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to spend some time offline talking about some of this stuff. My wife and I did 6 months cross country and hit up Grand Teton National Park. And I felt like you could spend months in that place and still just kind of scratch the surface. It's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Well, this might have answered the next question. Would you rather vacation in the mountains or at the beach?
I'm definitely a mountains person. I can answer that one very. That's the only 5 second answer I'll give you on this.
Perfect. Favorite app on your phone?
Favorite app on my phone? That's a great question. I mean, it's probably I spend most of my time on. Uh, I don't know how to answer this question. It's probably. I mean, I use it a lot for email, work, that kind of thing. If it's like, what am I doing to like kind of wind down or disconnect or something like that? I will admit that I got off all social media, but I am on Instagram. I've kind of you know curated a nice mix of like nature, birds, that kind of stuff that pops up on my homepage. So
I applaud you. That's fantastic. Trying to do the same, it's tough. It sucks you in, gets its hooks in you, and then it's like, oh, I need to get away from this.
yeah,
All Trails is a cool app. If you're sounds like you're doing some hiking, so that's probably one that I lean into more than not.
that's a good one.
Um, what is the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
Oh gosh. Well, I have sworn that I will never wear a turtleneck again. Growing up in the 80s and early 90s, I had a lot of turtlenecks. Um, this one I'm actually kind of proud of, but I probably will never do it again. I don't know if whatever, but I used to roll my jeans.
Mm.
Like I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone, but I'll probably never do it again. But I kind of liked it, so I'll admit I thought it looked good. So.
Did they used to call that pegged your jeans, like where you roll the bottoms up?
Uh, I don't
Is it
remember it being called that, but that it could be. I, I,
okay?
I think I think I called it rolled, like we'd roll the jeans. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, turtlenecks. We'll take that. It's a strong answer. Um, what do you love most about yourself?
um, what do I love most about myself? I think that I don't know, that's a hard question. Um, I think I like the fact that I am someone who seeks out challenge and likes to be challenged, and kind of push myself to to kind of learn new things and take on new goals and objectives.
Nice. Last one, and we'll close on this. Favorite Disney character?
Well, that's somewhat easier for me now because, and I'm probably going to regret and think of like six great answers after I get off this call. But I was born in 1977. Star Wars has always been one of my favorites. So I can technically
You
list
can.
basically any Star Wars character and get away with like
Yeah.
that's a Disney whatever. So I'll go with Han Solo. That was I'm just a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah. Yeah. Disney's just owns it all these days, doesn't it? So could go down some Marvel paths. You can go down Star Wars. So yeah, Han Solo will take it. Well, good stuff. Well, Greg, thanks for spending time with us. We're excited about the future and the work that you all are building. The mission behind Ad Hoc. It's truly a space that needs continued attention, and we're rooting for you all. It's great to have you on the podcast, and yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.